One slap, one moment, and an entire town was forced to face the ugly truth it had always ignored. When Police Lieutenant Natalie Drexler arrogantly raised her hand against a man she assumed powerless, she had no idea she'd just struck a respected judge. Overnight, Ashbury's hidden darkness exploded into the spotlight, revealing deep-rooted racism, corruption, and decades of buried injustice. As Drexler's authority shattered into disgrace, a courageous community rose, determined to reclaim their dignity and rewrite their future. This is the powerful true story of what happens when silence breaks, accountability awakens, and justice finally finds its voice. The slap echoed sharply through courtroom 4B, slicing the heavy silence like the crack of a whip. For an instant afterward, everything was still. Lawyers froze mid-sentence. The court stenographer's fingers hovered motionless above her keyboard, and the defendant's mouth hung open in stunned disbelief. Lieutenant Natalie Drexler stood motionless, her raised hand trembling slightly. She could feel her heart pounding, pulse hammering in her ears. Breath shallow, eyes wide with sudden, dawning horror, Natalie stared at the man she had just struck, a man she had presumed to be just another unruly defendant. He straightened slowly, calmly adjusting the lapels of his impeccable suit jacket. His eyes were steady, unflinching, radiating quiet authority. He cleared his throat gently, not raising his voice, yet speaking clearly enough for everyone to hear. "I'm Judge Terrence Hayes, and I am presiding over this court today." Natalie felt the color drain from her face, a cold wave of realization washing over her. Her pulse quickened even further, panic rising like acid in her throat. The courtroom erupted into murmurs, whispers quickly growing into an indignant buzz. In that devastating instant, something fundamental fractured within her. A sense of invulnerability she had carefully maintained over years crumbled irreparably. Natalie swallowed hard, her mouth dry, feeling utterly exposed, naked before the judgmental eyes of the room. Within hours, video footage surged across social media. Natalie's slap transformed from isolated local incident to viral national outrage overnight. Ashbury, Tennessee, a sleepy southern town previously unremarkable and unknown, was suddenly thrust into an unwanted spotlight. Headlines screamed across news sites. "White police officer slaps black judge in open court." The outcry grew swiftly. Commentary emerged instantly on systemic racism, police brutality, unchecked power, and corruption. With Natalie's single impulsive act becoming a symbol for deeper issues society grappled with nationwide. Natalie Drexler's entire life had been one of privilege and unquestioned authority. Born into a prominent Ashbury family, her uncle, a respected former sheriff, her father a celebrated Vietnam veteran, Natalie had always enjoyed automatic respect, authority assumed rather than earned. Her position within the Ashbury Police Department had felt natural, preordained by family legacy. But beneath her immaculate uniform lay troubling truths. Natalie's career was marked by aggressiveness, masked as assertiveness, prejudice concealed beneath the veneer of vigilance. Ashbury's predominantly black and Latino neighborhoods bore the brunt of her heavy-handed enforcement tactics, justified officially under ambiguous terms like resisting arrest or suspicious activity. Marcus Bell had experienced her authority firsthand. Returning home exhausted after a night shift, Marcus reached for his wallet during a routine stop. Natalie reacted violently, leaving Marcus with a fractured wrist and a deep fear of authority figures. Despite filing complaints, Marcus's grievances vanished quietly, ignored by a system indifferent to accountability. Janelle Santos had faced similar injustice. Stopped outside a grocery store, accused of minor traffic infractions, Janelle endured a humiliating roadside search, forced to watch her terrified daughter cry helplessly. Natalie had stood over her coldly, indifferent to Janelle's dignity, confident her badge protected her from consequence. Janelle's complaints, like Marcus's, vanished silently into Ashbury's bureaucratic void. But this slap public undeniable, caught clearly on camera, was different. Natalie's protection had vanished. leaving her vulnerable, exposed, defenseless. Colleagues who once respected her authority now avoided her gaze, unwilling to risk association. The police union's cautious statements offered minimal support. Her family's influence proved insufficient to mitigate the rapidly growing scandal. Across town, Judge Terrence Hayes quietly observed Ashbury's reaction. Recently appointed, Hayes had arrived with a reputation for steadfast civil rights advocacy, quietly but determinedly reforming systemic injustices. Hayes's career was characterized not by spectacle, but by patient, deliberate pursuit of accountability. Hayes recognized deeply embedded problems within Ashbury's justice system soon after his arrival. Quietly, meticulously, he had been gathering troubling evidence, compiling carefully documented records detailing patterns of discriminatory enforcement. The slap had merely accelerated Hayes's quiet yet persistent reform efforts, providing a catalyst, forcing Ashbury finally to confront deeply hidden injustices. As national attention intensified, Ashbury Police Department descended quietly into turmoil. Officers previously complicit, silent observers, exchanged worried glances, feeling suddenly vulnerable, fearful their complicity might soon become public knowledge. Internal affairs, previously indifferent, received sudden surges of anonymous reports detailing deeply troubling allegations, racial profiling, excessive force, intimidation, evidence tampering, all tied directly to Natalie Drexler. Rookie Officer Eli Chandler, previously silenced for attempting to expose Natalie's misconduct, quietly provided comprehensive logs detailing clearly disproportionate enforcement against minority neighborhoods. Former Officer Jesse Marks, forced previously into resignation, resurfaced quietly, bearing carefully preserved documents proving systematic falsification of arrest records. Records clerk Anya Robles revealed carefully safeguarded digital records demonstrating deliberate manipulation of official arrest logs. Each quiet, courageous revelation intensified scrutiny, forcing Ashbury's leadership finally to acknowledge publicly deep systemic failings they had long ignored quietly. In her small, dimly lit apartment miles from Ashbury, Natalie Drexler quietly confronted the unbearable weight of remorse. Nights stretched endlessly, sleep evading her as memories replayed with painful clarity. The authority she had wielded with such arrogance now seemed hollow, built entirely on inherited privilege and unchecked prejudice. Each quiet reflection brought uncomfortable truths. Her decisions had inflicted lasting harm, masked under a veneer of lawful authority. Attempts at damage control failed utterly. Previously trusted allies distanced themselves quickly, fearful of association. Natalie experienced profound vulnerability, her authority stripped abruptly, irretrievably. The Ashbury Civilian Oversight Board swiftly scheduled an unprecedented public hearing, responding decisively to mounting public outrage, and meticulously documented evidence compiled quietly by Judge Hayes. Natalie attended silently, stripped symbolically and literally of uniform, identity profoundly reduced from respected authority figure to vulnerable defendant. The hearing convened solemnly, witnessed by national media, civil rights advocates, Ashbury residents, all attending quietly, understanding fully the hearing's significance. Testimony unfolded quietly, yet powerfully. Officer Naomi Brennan detailed clearly Natalie's intimidating departmental presence. Marcus Bell spoke quietly yet compellingly about enduring trauma. Jesse Marks methodically dismantled Natalie's professional fraud, presenting quietly devastating documentary proof. Anya Robles's digital evidence proved quietly decisive, demonstrating clearly, undeniably, systemic manipulation rather than isolated misconduct. Natalie remained uncharacteristically silent throughout testimonies, composure fracturing visibly with each quiet yet devastating revelation. Her lawyer's efforts to redirect attention failed utterly, evidence quietly overwhelming, undeniable. The board's unanimous verdict arrived swiftly. Immediate removal from duty, rank revocation, criminal investigation recommended. Natalie Drexler left the hearing quietly, her footsteps heavy with defeat, each step a painful admission of irreversible mistakes. Once powerful, now stripped entirely of authority, she felt the piercing gazes of former colleagues and community members burning into her back. Her pride, identity, and privilege dissolved irretrievably, leaving behind only an overwhelming emptiness. Alone in her silent apartment, Natalie sank into a chair, staring into darkness, confronting fully, for the first time, the true consequences of her arrogance. In that painful solitude, Natalie recognized that her power had always been an illusion, and now only reality remained, stark and inescapable. Hayes understood deeply genuine transformation required consistent vigilance rather than fleeting spectacle, and this moment represented merely beginning Ashbury's profound journey toward meaningful reform. The aftermath ushered quiet yet profound institutional transformation within Ashbury's police department. Racial sensitivity training became meaningful, mandatory. Genuine community oversight replaced symbolic gestures. Officers confronted openly past complicity, embracing accountability over silence. Natalie Drexler left the hearing silently, stripped of her authority and dignity, confronting for the first time the devastating consequences of her actions. Alone in her apartment, she sat in silence, consumed by regret and shame. Meanwhile, Judge Terrence Hayes, understanding the gravity of the moment, quietly recognized this as merely the beginning of Ashbury's long path toward genuine accountability. In the days immediately following the public hearing, Ashbury became the epicenter of intense national scrutiny. Media trucks lined courthouse streets, journalists probing relentlessly into a system that had long operated under a veil of quiet complicity. Online, the video of Natalie Drexler's courtroom slap became a viral catalyst, fueling passionate discussions about institutional racism, police accountability, and overdue reforms. Social media erupted into viral outrage, each replay of the slap video reinforcing public indignation, magnifying calls for justice and systemic reform. Ashbury's previously hidden complicity in racial discrimination and unchecked police misconduct was suddenly starkly exposed, no longer concealable beneath bureaucratic silence or institutional inertia. Inside the Ashbury Police Department, an unprecedented sense of unease permeated quietly, infecting conversations and interactions among officers. Trust evaporated swiftly, replaced by cautious suspicion. Colleagues previously loyal to Natalie avoided eye contact, fearful of being associated with her rapidly collapsing legacy. The department's once unquestioned authority now felt deeply vulnerable, exposed, uncertain. Internal affairs, historically passive, now faced overwhelming public and political pressure to conduct genuine, thorough investigations. In the cramped office of Internal Affairs, Detective Richard Maxwell leaned back in his worn leather chair, eyes heavy with exhaustion. Each complaint he reviewed painted a grim picture of a department quietly corrupted from within. Natalie Drexler's name appeared repeatedly, starkly highlighting a troubling pattern of misconduct that he had long overlooked or rationalized away. Richard's loyalty had always been unwavering. Drexler was someone he'd trusted implicitly, a leader whose strength and decisiveness he admired. But the accumulating evidence was impossible to ignore, and a gnawing sense of betrayal ate at him, forcing uncomfortable questions. Internal affairs meetings grew increasingly tense, charged with unspoken conflict between senior officers, stubbornly defending Natalie's reputation, and younger investigators who saw her actions clearly as abuses demanding accountability. Richard found himself frequently mediating, walking a thin line between the department's ingrained culture of silence and the relentless public demand for transparency. Secret conversations, whispered hallway confrontations, and tense late-night meetings became commonplace, each further weakening the protective barrier once surrounding Natalie Drexler. Quietly, yet firmly, anonymous tips flooded IA inboxes, each carefully documenting troubling abuses directly connected to Natalie Drexler, racial profiling, excessive force, evidence tampering, intimidation. Each report quietly reinforced a troubling pattern of systemic complicity, rather than isolated misconduct. Eli Chandler, the rookie officer previously sidelined for attempting to expose Natalie's abuses, now quietly, yet courageously compiled detailed logs documenting clearly disproportionate traffic stops, targeting Ashbury's minority neighborhoods. Eli had preserved meticulously every troubling encounter, determined privately to maintain integrity despite departmental indifference. His quiet courage inspired others previously silenced to come forward publicly, courageously sharing evidence previously hidden by intimidation and fear. Jesse Marks, a former Ashbury officer forced into resignation after confronting Natalie's brutality, quietly resurfaced, bearing carefully preserved departmental documents. Jesse's meticulous files demonstrated deliberate falsification of arrest records, intentional suppression of citizen complaints, and systematic abuses quietly endorsed by departmental silence. Jesse's quiet, yet courageous revelations galvanized further scrutiny, reinforcing public demands for genuine accountability and reform. Records clerk Anya Robles quietly emerged as an unexpected yet powerful catalyst for accountability. Anya had long witnessed departmental abuses silently, yet privately preserved meticulous digital evidence, clearly demonstrating Natalie's deliberate manipulation of arrest logs. Anya's careful documentation proved quietly decisive, publicly illustrating clearly systemic abuses rather than isolated misconduct. Her quiet bravery forced departmental transparency, publicly compelling genuine accountability and reform. Judge Terrence Hayes quietly observed Ashbury's intensifying scrutiny, allowing evidence to accumulate organically rather than publicly intervening. Hayes understood, clearly, genuine accountability required sustained momentum rather than fleeting outrage, patiently allowing quietly courageous revelations to emerge authentically, rather than directing public narratives personally. His silence was never passive. It was strategic, powerful, amplifying the credibility of those brave enough to speak the truth publicly. Natalie Drexler, suspended pending investigation, watched helplessly as her carefully constructed authority dissolved rapidly into isolation and anxiety. Natalie experienced profound vulnerability, previously trusted colleagues now distancing themselves swiftly, fearful of association. Alone in her apartment late at night, Natalie paced restlessly, the shadows of the dimly lit room closing in. Fragments of past conversations haunted her mind, her uncle's voice proudly describing the Drexler legacy of law enforcement, her father's stern yet approving gaze during her graduation from the police academy. Each memory now felt bitter, distorted, reflecting a truth she'd ignored. Her entire identity built upon inherited privilege rather than earned respect. The isolation deepened. Friends stopped calling. Family visits became strained, brief, and eventually non-existent. Natalie spent nights replaying not only the courtroom incident, but countless smaller moments of cruelty, indifference, and arrogance she once brushed off casually. She wrestled privately with unfamiliar emotions, regret, guilt, and overwhelming loneliness. Her once impenetrable self-confidence dissolved quietly, replaced permanently by profound insecurity. Family influence proved insufficient against overwhelming evidence. The system she previously controlled now distancing itself swiftly, leaving Natalie isolated and powerless. Natalie's isolation deepened into quiet yet profound psychological introspection. Alone in her dimly lit apartment, Natalie's thoughts frequently returned to the courtroom incident, memories replaying persistently, painfully. Natalie reflected deeply on privileges inherited rather than earned, authority sustained by intimidation rather than genuine respect. Her identity, built meticulously yet superficially upon institutional complicity, now dissolved irrevocably, leaving Natalie profoundly disoriented, anxious, regretful. Ashbury's Civilian Oversight Board swiftly scheduled an unprecedented public hearing, responding decisively to mounting public pressure and meticulously documented evidence compiled quietly by Judge Hayes. Natalie attended quietly, stripped symbolically of uniform and authority, profoundly vulnerable, reduced starkly from respected figure to defendant. The hearing convened solemnly, witnessed publicly by national media, community advocates, civil rights observers, local residents. Testimony unfolded quietly, yet devastatingly. Each witness systematically dismantling Natalie's carefully constructed professional image. The hearing room fell into an intense hush as Maria Thompson, a respected local teacher, stepped forward. Her hands shook slightly, gripping the podium for support as she recounted her humiliating roadside search by Natalie. Maria spoke softly, yet firmly, detailing the fear and embarrassment she endured that day. Her calm dignity contrasted starkly with Natalie's visibly eroding composure. Next, David Ruiz, a small business owner, quietly described the ruinous impact of Natalie's false accusations. His voice trembled with suppressed anger and sadness as he recalled losing customers, trust, and dignity. Community members listening in the audience murmured sympathetically, understanding clearly the deep, lasting wounds inflicted by Drexler's abuses. Natalie, seated silently, felt each word strike deeply. Her confidence shattered incrementally with each testimony, replaced gradually by a growing despair. She found it increasingly difficult to maintain eye contact, her thoughts spiraling inward to memories of past decisions, each justified at the time, now painfully exposed as indefensible acts of power misused. The public audience reacted emotionally, faces ranging from sorrowful sympathy to steely determination. Journalists scribbled notes furiously, fully aware that this moment marked a turning point, not just for Natalie Drexler, but for Ashbury itself. Officer Naomi Brennan testified clearly, detailing Natalie's departmental intimidation. Marcus Bell spoke quietly, yet compellingly, about enduring trauma inflicted unjustly by Natalie. Jesse Marks methodically presented clearly documented departmental abuses, systematically dismantling departmental silence and complicity. Anya Robles' digital records proved quietly decisive, demonstrating clearly and undeniably systemic manipulation rather than isolated misconduct. Anya's quiet courage profoundly shaped public understanding, forcing genuine accountability rather than symbolic gestures. Throughout testimonies, Natalie remained uncharacteristically silent, composure fracturing visibly, evidence quietly yet clearly overwhelming. Her lawyer's efforts to redirect failed utterly, evidence quietly undeniable, devastatingly thorough. The oversight board deliberated briefly, delivering verdict swiftly, unequivocally. Immediate removal from duty, rank revocation, criminal investigation recommended. Natalie quietly accepted verdict, devastated yet resigned, leaving profoundly isolated, permanently disgraced. Judge Terrence Hayes quietly observed Natalie's departure, understanding significance beyond personal accountability. Hayes recognized genuine transformation required, sustained vigilance rather than fleeting spectacle. Understanding deeply, Ashbury's transformation remained ongoing rather than complete. In aftermath, Ashbury's police department undertook quiet yet substantive reforms. Racial sensitivity training became meaningful rather than procedural. Community oversight gained genuine authority, transforming accountability from symbolic to tangible. Officers confronted openly departmental complicity, embracing transparency rather than silence. Residents noticed tangible policing improvements immediately, cautious optimism replacing justified mistrust. Community meetings in Ashbury became powerful gatherings of shared trauma and collective resolve. Jesse Marks and Marcus Bell quietly facilitated conversations, gently empowering residents previously silenced by fear. Voices once hesitant became firm, unified in their demands for lasting reform. These meetings gave rise to community-driven initiatives, legal education workshops, and active oversight groups, genuinely holding authorities accountable. Anya Robles attended each meeting quietly, diligently recording testimonies, carefully preserving these powerful accounts for future accountability. Her quiet dedication reinforced a permanent shift in Ashbury's collective consciousness. A resolute commitment to transparency, justice, and meaningful reconciliation. Community residents voiced passionate, heartfelt pleas for deeper systemic change calls, not just for Natalie Drexler's accountability, but a broader reckoning with Ashbury's ingrained racial injustices. Small groups formed naturally, mobilizing quietly yet powerfully, determined to hold local institutions permanently accountable. Anya Robles often attended these meetings, quietly documenting stories, ensuring voices previously unheard became permanently visible. Her quiet dedication provided critical momentum, reinforcing a new community ethos, emphasizing accountability, resilience, and enduring change. Jesse Marks channeled past injustices into community education, training residents quietly yet powerfully about legal rights during police encounters. Marcus Bell, Janelle Santos joined efforts regularly, finding healing and purpose through quiet empowerment of others. Anya Robles quietly ensured departmental transparency became routine rather than exceptional, permanently safeguarding departmental integrity against future abuses. Journalist Layla Torrance continued quietly vigilant reporting, ensuring accountability remained constant rather than temporary. Months after the hearing, Natalie Drexler quietly adjusted to her isolated new life, several counties away, working anonymously as a security guard. Her daily existence was humble, her nights filled with remorseful reflection. Occasional news from Ashbury served as constant reminders of irreversible mistakes, deepening her sense of solitude and regret. Meanwhile, Judge Terrence Hayes observed Ashbury's slow but genuine transformation from within his courtroom. Late one evening, returning thoughtfully to his chambers, he carefully penned a final journal entry, reflecting deeply on lessons learned. Real accountability is neither quick nor easy. It demands ongoing vigilance, patience, and unwavering commitment. Ashbury has taken its first crucial steps, yet our journey must continue deliberately and consciously. Quietly closing his journal, Hayes knew clearly that the transformation of Ashbury required continued courage, dedication, and persistence. In the quiet, dim solitude of her new apartment, Natalie Drexler sat silently, her gaze fixed blankly on the evening news. Images of Ashbury's transformed community flickered across the screen, highlighting the town's healing progress, newfound unity, and reforms she had inadvertently triggered. Each smiling face, each news headline about positive change was a quiet indictment, a bitter reminder of her own fall from grace. Natalie had relocated several counties away, taking a modest, anonymous job as a security guard at a small logistics warehouse. The uniform she wore now bore no medals, no commendations, just plain, functional fabric. Her name no longer commanded respect. In fact, she rarely heard it spoken. The anonymity was both a relief and a torment. Once powerful, influential, and feared, she now lived in shadows, recognized by nobody. She awoke each morning feeling a crushing weight in her chest, a relentless sense of loss, compounded by regret. Her reflections were filled with endless repetitions of the same moment. The slap in courtroom 4B. She dissected it obsessively, painfully aware now that her arrogance and impulsiveness had permanently destroyed the facade of authority she'd so carefully constructed. Evenings were hardest, the loneliness nearly tangible. She cooked simple dinners alone, the television on low, the apartment echoing with memories she could no longer outrun. Her phone rarely rang. Old colleagues avoided her calls, and her family's occasional check-ins had grown distant, awkward, eventually ceasing altogether. The isolation was profound. Natalie was imprisoned by the consequences of her own actions. Often, she paced restlessly, memories playing in her mind like fragments of an old film. She remembered family dinners filled with pride, her uncle's booming voice recounting stories of justice, her father's stern yet approving glances. Those memories, once comforting, now mocked her, reminders of inherited privilege misused, trust betrayed, and an identity built upon illusions. Her small apartment offered no distraction from regret. Photos from her past graduation day at the academy, a commendation ceremony at Ashbury's town hall, informal snapshots with colleagues, sat packed away, too painful to confront directly, yet impossible to discard. She had lost everything that defined her: authority, respect, pride, and even her sense of self. Power, once her shield and weapon, now lay shattered at her feet. At her security job, Natalie performed quietly and diligently, careful never to assert herself unnecessarily. The confident posture and assertive demeanor that had once defined her now seemed distant, foreign, irretrievable. Colleagues at the warehouse, unaware of her past, regarded her indifferently, occasionally greeting her politely, but rarely engaging further. The solitude continued, her self-imposed exile deepening. One cold evening, as Natalie patrolled the dimly lit warehouse aisles, a news report flickered on a nearby television in the break room. Judge Terrence Hayes appeared briefly on the screen, receiving an award from the state's governor for his quiet, yet transformative reforms in Ashbury. Natalie paused, breath caught painfully in her chest, watching Hayes accept the honor with understated humility. The contrast between his quiet dignity and her fallen pride was unbearable. She felt a stab of bitterness, followed quickly by shame. She had wronged a man whose only goal had been justice. A surge of self-loathing flooded her, forcing her to avert her eyes from the screen. Hayes symbolized all she had failed to become: respected, impactful, genuine. The pain of realization burned deep, stripping away the last remnants of denial. As days turned into weeks and then months, Natalie found herself retreating further inward. Her solitary walks after shifts became opportunities for quiet introspection. She began to examine, honestly and harshly, the beliefs she had once held unquestioningly. The prejudices she'd embraced under the guise of vigilance now appeared starkly as fear and ignorance. Her authority had been rooted not in strength, but in weakness. Her cruelty, a mask for deeper insecurities she had been unwilling or unable to confront. On one such walk, as rain fell lightly, Natalie paused beside a small park, watching families interact lovingly, untroubled by the darkness of her internal struggle. She was struck suddenly by a powerful, aching longing for connection, something genuine, untainted by power or fear. It was a feeling entirely new and deeply unsettling, forcing her to recognize the emptiness of her previous existence. She had spent decades pursuing authority, only to discover its hollowness when stripped of humanity. Late that night, restless and unable to sleep, Natalie retrieved an old notebook from a dusty box beneath her bed. Opening it slowly, she began to write something she hadn't done in years. At first, the words came haltingly, painfully, but gradually they flowed more freely. She wrote openly, honestly, about the choices she'd made, the damage she'd caused, the lives she'd carelessly wounded. Over time, these private confessions became a nightly ritual, providing a quiet, modest relief. She wrote letters she would never send, apologies to Marcus Bell, Janelle Santos, Jesse Marks, and countless unnamed others she had wronged. She wrote one addressed to Judge Hayes, expressing regret for the arrogance and prejudice that had blinded her. She knew these words would never undo her harm, but writing them brought clarity, acceptance, and a humble, personal redemption. Natalie's daily existence remained simple, anonymous, and humble, but slowly, imperceptibly, she began to find meaning in the quiet routine. Authority had once defined her entirely. Now it felt irrelevant, replaced gradually by humility, introspection, and self-awareness. She realized, finally, that genuine strength required not force, but compassion, qualities she had neglected or actively suppressed throughout her life. Months passed quietly, her solitary reflections guiding her gradually toward a newfound, modest peace. She never returned to Ashbury, nor did she attempt to reconcile publicly or seek forgiveness from those she wronged. She accepted fully the permanence of her consequences, recognizing the depth and permanence of the damage she had caused. Yet, privately, within her own silent world, Natalie Drexler had begun the quiet, painful, and essential journey towards self-forgiveness and humility. One evening, as another news story highlighted further positive reforms within Ashbury, Natalie sat quietly, a rare, genuine smile briefly crossing her lips. Her loss had become the town's gain, her disgrace a catalyst for real, lasting change. There was solace in that, painful yet quietly profound. The community she had harmed had risen stronger, wiser, more united. And though she would forever remain outside it, her heart found quiet redemption in knowing that from her darkest moment had sprung lasting light. Alone, humbled, and finally self-aware, Natalie accepted her quiet fate, a life lived anonymously, unheralded, yet deeply introspective. She would spend the rest of her days quietly confronting the truths she once ignored, understanding finally that genuine power lay not in domination, but in empathy, humility, and quiet resilience. Her authority had vanished, replaced permanently by a deeper, harder-won wisdom, the quiet understanding that justice, true justice, demanded accountability, humility, and personal courage. Natalie Drexler, the former lieutenant who once defined herself by power and privilege, had become a quiet testament to humanity's capacity for growth, redemption, and genuine transformation. After Natalie Drexler's fall, Ashbury stood at the crossroads of its own identity, deeply fractured, yet, for the first time, openly confronting a legacy of injustice. Judge Terrence Hayes' courtroom had become the symbolic epicenter of accountability, a place where painful truths had been exposed. But outside those courtroom walls, the real work was only beginning. Months after the public hearing, Ashbury was experiencing a profound shift. Initially cautious, citizens gradually emerged from the shadow of decades-long fear and silence. Town hall meetings, once perfunctory and thinly attended, became robust forums for honest dialogue, filled to capacity with residents determined to reshape their town's future. Jesse Marks and Marcus Bell, whose own experiences had been catalysts for change, became trusted leaders within these assemblies, guiding conversations with sensitivity and strength. Jesse, once a resigned officer disillusioned by systemic corruption, now found purpose empowering those around him. He stood quietly confident, his presence encouraging hesitant voices to share openly. Marcus Bell, whose wrist bore permanent scars of injustice, became a symbol of quiet resilience. Rather than bitterness, Marcus radiated a calm determination to channel personal trauma into collective healing. Together, Jesse and Marcus organized legal literacy workshops and forums for community policing dialogue, breaking down barriers that had stood for decades. These workshops provided residents with tools they'd never previously possessed, an understanding of their rights, avenues to safely report misconduct, and the confidence to advocate for fair treatment. Each session was carefully documented by Anya Robles, whose meticulous notes ensured transparency, accountability, and permanent historical record. Yet the community's transformation required more than dialogue. It demanded genuine structural reform. Ashbury's police department, previously resistant and opaque, underwent radical, internal transformation under new oversight. New hiring practices emerged, prioritizing diversity, empathy, and community-oriented policing. Training shifted profoundly, moving beyond superficial sessions into deeply introspective programs addressing implicit bias and institutional racism. Officers no longer saw themselves as apart from the community, but genuinely connected, accountable, and trusted. Richard Maxwell, the once loyal internal affairs detective, became a pivotal figure in the department's transformation. Having faced personal conflicts and painful truths, Maxwell chose transparency over loyalty to a corrupted system. He now led initiatives to investigate not just misconduct, but the systemic failures that had enabled abuse. He spearheaded internal accountability measures, instituting mandatory reviews of arrests, regular body cam audits, and community oversight committees, changes previously unthinkable in Ashbury. Though initially resistant, most officers gradually embraced the changes, recognizing them as essential to regaining public trust. Yet Maxwell understood clearly that meaningful reform was neither quick nor comfortable. Resistance persisted among a few, subtle and quiet, reminding everyone that vigilance must remain constant. Genuine transformation, Maxwell often reminded colleagues, was a journey without an endpoint, progress demanding sustained courage, self-awareness, and humility. The physical landscape of Ashbury itself began reflecting this internal transformation. Once neglected neighborhoods, particularly the South Ward, experienced tangible revitalization efforts. Parks and community centers previously underfunded became vibrant hubs for education, outreach, and empowerment. Local businesses and schools collaborated, driven by newfound optimism and unity. Streets previously associated with police stops and fear now resonated with community-driven initiatives and open, joyful gatherings. Ashbury's first annual Unity and Justice Festival marked a visible milestone in the community's healing process. Organized collaboratively by Jesse, Marcus, Anya, and numerous community leaders, the festival became a profound demonstration of unity and collective resilience. Streets overflowed with laughter, music, and vibrant celebration, a tangible contrast to decades of quiet anxiety and fear. Judge Terrence Hayes attended quietly, speaking little but listening intently, watching the community genuinely enjoy a sense of safety, pride, and collective identity reinforced the profound lessons learned over the past year. During the festival, Marcus Bell gave a short, powerful speech, capturing the heart of Ashbury's transformation. Today, we celebrate not because we've forgotten our wounds, but because we've learned from them. We honor our past by building a future defined not by power and prejudice, but by empathy, understanding, and justice. We celebrate not the completion of our journey, but the courage we've found in taking the first steps. His words resonated deeply, becoming a guiding principle for Ashbury's ongoing journey of transformation. Throughout these months, Judge Hayes quietly observed Ashbury's progress, often reflecting privately. He recognized the importance of visible change, but understood deeply the necessity of sustained vigilance. Genuine reform required more than momentary outrage or superficial solutions. It demanded consistency, integrity, and patience. One evening, as Hayes walked slowly through the transformed South Ward, he paused briefly, observing families laughing freely in newly renovated parks, young children playing without anxiety or fear. Ashbury had fundamentally changed. Yet Hayes remained cautiously hopeful, understanding that true justice required ongoing commitment, not complacency. Upon returning thoughtfully to his chambers, he carefully opened his leather-bound journal, pen poised carefully above the page. He wrote slowly, deliberately, capturing profound reflections of Ashbury's transformative journey. True accountability is a continuous act, an ongoing practice of humility, integrity, and resilience. Ashbury has transformed visibly, yet its deepest changes lie within its people. Changes born from confronting painful truths, challenging deeply held assumptions, and choosing courage over silence. Our task remains not simply to sustain these changes, but to deepen them continually, consciously, permanently. And quietly closing his journal, Hayes knew clearly that Ashbury's transformation required more than initial reforms or celebrations. It required constant, enduring dedication to genuine justice. Meanwhile, in her quiet solitude far from Ashbury, Natalie Drexler experienced the town's transformation only through occasional news updates. Each report served simultaneously as a reminder of her mistakes and a quiet, private comfort that her actions, though destructive, had inadvertently sparked profound positive change. The town she had harmed now emerged stronger, more unified, and deeply resilient. Natalie accepted fully that she could never return to Ashbury. Her role was permanent outsider, her legacy defined clearly by profound failure. Yet, privately, quietly, she found solace in the knowledge that her fall had catalyzed real, lasting change. Alone each night, she confronted the painful truths of her past actions. Gradually, these reflections brought acceptance, humility, and private redemption. Her story remained one of caution, regret, and irreversible consequence. Yet within her solitude was the quiet acknowledgement that from her lowest moment had sprung Ashbury's lasting growth. Back in Ashbury, as months turned slowly into a year, the community's resolve strengthened visibly. Jesse Marks continued quietly mentoring youth. Marcus Bell provided steadfast leadership, and Anya Robles meticulously documented each step, each achievement, ensuring no part of their journey would ever be forgotten. Each community leader recognized clearly that Ashbury's healing was neither quick nor superficial. It was a collective, continuous commitment to justice, accountability, and genuine reconciliation. Judge Terrence Hayes, meanwhile, became quietly revered, respected deeply, not just for his authority, but for his integrity, humility, and quiet courage. Yet Hayes himself never sought recognition or accolades. His goal remained simply justice. Quietly, deliberately, he reinforced daily the importance of accountability, empathy, and introspection within his courtroom, his chambers, and his community. Ashbury's transformation became increasingly visible, yet its deeper significance lay quietly beneath the surface, in residents who now understood clearly their collective power, in institutions genuinely reformed, and in the quiet, persistent vigilance sustaining their ongoing journey toward genuine justice. For Ashbury, genuine healing was no longer an abstract goal, but an ongoing reality, imperfect, yet profound, fragile, yet resilient. Their journey toward genuine transformation had begun with pain, but had continued with courage, introspection, and quiet determination. Each citizen understood clearly that genuine justice was neither immediate nor easy. It required continual reflection, integrity, and sustained vigilance. And so, the community continued its journey deliberately, thoughtfully, fully committed, each step quietly, yet powerfully reshaping Ashbury. One person at a time, one action at a time, one quiet reflection at a time. Ashbury had found itself not through spectacle, but through quiet strength, unwavering courage, and persistent integrity. Its journey remained ongoing, yet undeniably genuine.